Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Again, happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Shabbat Shalom, Feliz Sábado, Bienvenida a Nuestra Iglesia. Welcome to our church. We are glad that we have our friends and family, our visitors that are here with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. This word religion is thrown around a lot. We actually, I know this group that we're associated with. They're Sabbath keepers, upstate New York, and they don't like to refer to themselves as a religion. They think that the term religion has negative connotations, which it probably does in some areas. Some people see religion as legalistic and over-focused, more human-oriented, based on doctrinal guidelines rather than spiritual guidance that we get from the Holy Spirit. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what it really means to be religious, to be part of a religious organization, what religion really talks about, and what our responsibilities and obligations are in our walk with God. So, Lord, again, so grateful for your presence here in our lives today, and I just ask that you would be with us today, Lord, as we go about this journey today. Amen. I'm remembering to do this, and so I don't have to later be surprised that how come nobody knew what I was talking about. I want to start with Deuteronomy 6:4-9, and this is the 6:4 starts with the Shema. In Hebrew, it's Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And the word Echad is sort of a term of a singularity or a unity. So it talks about this idea of, from my interpretation of it, of the Godhead. It says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." There are several Jewish traditions that revolve around that. In fact, at my house, we have what are called mezuzah. And the mezuzah is a small emblem, if you will, that gets nailed to the doorpost of the house as you're coming in. It contains usually the Shema and the Ten Commandments. There's something called tefillin. When I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home, we had to wrap tefillin. One of these days I'm going to bring it in. Today would have been a good day, and I forgot. But the tefillin is where you wrap this leather band around your hand a certain number of times, and one of them goes on your hand, and it says, "You shall bind them as a sign on your hand," and the boxes contain the Ten Commandments. Then you wrap it up, and it comes around, and it puts the second box is wrapped onto the forehead, as it says here, "shall be frontlets between your eyes." And it's a symbolic in Judaism that it represents the Ten Commandments being in our hands, which is what? Which represents our work that we do for God. And in between the frontlets, between our eyes, is the frontal lobe of the brain, where we have that sort of higher order of function and communication with God. And Deuteronomy, it's not a book of laws. I know people look at it that way. But it's a book of the heart. It's an instruction on how we live. The commandments are not presented here in a legal manner in Deuteronomy. And I know that people see this as legalism sometimes, but they're cast in the style of a sermon. They're sort of interwoven with pleas and supplication. So I love the book of Deuteronomy. I don't read it as something that's harsh and unyielding. So the question is, we need to start first, is that what is a religion? Well, there's two identifying features of any religion to some extent. The first is they all require faith, right? And the second is they seek to organize and influence the thought of the people who are members of that religion. I remember being in a Publix one time, and I was coming up to the checkout, and there was a guy behind me, and I turned around, and he was there, and it said, it had an American flag on it, and it said, in no God we trust. It was weird, instead of in God we trust. And I was just staring at it, and he kind of picked up on that. And he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Sorry, I never saw a hat like that. That's different." And he said, "Do you believe in God?" And I said, "Well, yeah, actually I do. Do you?" And he said, "No, I don't." He said, "I don't believe there is a God." And I said, "Well, what's interesting about the two of us, what we both share is faith." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, it requires faith for me to believe that there is a God, and it requires a lot of faith for you to go on with life believing there isn't a God." And so that is one of the foundational components of a religion. Webster's defines religion as any specific system of belief, worship, or conduct, often involving a code of ethics or a philosophy. It's dialectic in a sense. Two identifying features of religions are that to some extent they all require faith, we just talked about this, and seek to organize and influence the thoughts and actions of their adherents. Now the question is religion the same as spirituality? And actually, I don't believe it is. I think that a person can be religious in their adherence to doctrine, but not necessarily spiritual in their following of Jesus. Or if it's any other religion, I guess, of any God that they may choose to follow, there are those two parts to it. Spirituality is a premise that is ill-defined. This is by Eugene Peterson. He says that he's a pastor writer, and he says the term is indefinable yet recognizable, transcendence vaguely intermingled with intimacy. What's he really saying there? The transcendence is that we have this sense that there's some life that extends beyond me, and the intimacy says that there's some sort of core relationship component to it that's deep within me. In Christian Century, March 22nd, 2003, page 30. It says, spirituality recognizes an organic linkage between this beyond and within that are part of everyone's experience. So here's the problem I find. It's very difficult to define spirituality. It's not as hard to define religion, because religions are often defined by their doctrinal beliefs, by their organizational structures, by the adherence to those doctrines. And it's like with Seventh-day Adventists, we're a membership-based organization, right? It's not just some fellowship, like you have the 12-step fellowships, right? AA says that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. But within a church, it's not like that, right? There's a baptism requirement. There's an adherence to the basic doctrinal beliefs and whatnot. So it's different. But where spirituality is a little harder to define, but it's based on more of a philosophy, if you will, of my relationship to whatever God it is that I worship. So for me, it's what's my relationship with Jesus Christ? Am I willing to do the things that Jesus would do? Do I reflect Jesus' character? And that to me is more of a response to spirituality. You can look at this. I mean, it's pretty amazing if you look at the distribution of religions that are out there. In fact, Seventh-day Adventists are in the top 10 religions. I was filling out this form online the other day. I think we're number 6 when it comes to actual population of church members and all. And I was filling out this form, and it gave you a drop-down list of all the different religious organizations, religions you associate with or that you identify with. And there was 11 or 12, and Adventism wasn't even on there, because it's not necessarily considered mainstream because of some of our beliefs in that. But you can see there's a huge component, with 16% of the population saying they're either agnostic or atheist. So a vast majority of people in this world have some religious belief. And whether it's spiritual or not, I don't know. But the question begs then to be asked is whether or not Jesus actually started a new religion. Did he start this new religion of Christianity when he came here, people who are followers of Christ? And I'll read from Matthew And we'll do a lot of reading from Matthew today, 5, 6, and 7. 17 to 20 says, he says, don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. So he didn't come to wipe out what we already understood as this concept of Christianity without calling it that. He says, no, I came to accomplish their purpose. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved. So if you ignore the least commandment and teach others to do the same, you will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But anyone who obeys God's laws and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. It goes on to say, but I warn you, unless your righteousness is better than the righteousness of the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So no, Jesus did not start a new faith or a new religion, but he made the old one better, if you will, by this sort of introduction of this unconditional love that was brought to the surface. And I believe it was already there. I know in the Old Testament, I mean, there's even schools that want to ban the Old Testament because they say it's too violent and that. But it depends. The way I look at it, what it does is it reveals God's character of love and that he loves us so much that he did everything he could to provide a pathway for us to salvation. We sabotaged it. It wasn't anything that God did. Well, the Bible also talks about this idea of what is pure religion, so that we can get a better sort of handle on what does it mean to be religious. Is it just what do we have, 27 or 28 doctrines, right, that we have within Adventism, or is it what the Baptists say or the Methodists or the Catholics? What is pure religion? There has to be some, if you look at a Venn diagram of all the different religions and all their different doctrinal beliefs, there has to be an intersection somewhere of the basic foundational belief system or philosophies that we have for religion. James 1:27 says, pure and genuine religion in the sight of God and the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. So it defines it for us. What is true religion? It's taking care of other people. What did Jesus do in the majority of his ministry? He saw to both the physical and emotional and spiritual needs of people. That's what he did. He traveled around attending to the needs that other people had. And it says that is what true religion should be to us. Miss White writes, pure religion has to do with the will. The will is the governing power in the nature of man, bringing all the other faculties under its sway. The will is not the taste or the inclination, but it is the deciding power which works in the children of men unto obedience to God or unto disobedience. Rabbi Hillel, talking about the Talmud, he says, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah, while the rest of it is commentary. Isn't that amazing? You ever see these T-shirts? It says, Jesus is everything, the rest is just whatever. How do those go? You've seen these T-shirts, right? Cycling is whatever, the rest is just details. That's it. So Jesus is it, and the rest is just details. And that's what Rabbi Hillel is saying here in the Talmud. He's saying that the commandment of loving your neighbor, right? That's it. And all the rest of it's just noise. It's just commentary. So is pure religion good religion or not? I mean, if the idea of pure religion is to be of service to others and not to be corrupted by the world, don't forget, it says that also. It says not only are we out helping people, but we are not being corrupted by the world as well as we do it. Pure religion is an imitation of Christ. I hate to go back to the old cliche, but what would Jesus do, right? Isn't that what people ask? What would Jesus do in this situation? I try to do that. I try to do it when I'm driving a lot, Somebody cuts you off or runs a light, and you're like, what would Jesus do? Bolt of lightning would come down. No, that's not what Jesus would do. You know, it's not Sodom and Gomorrah. I actually heard this guy talking one time, and and he said when he was going to fly, and there was a guy in front of him at this counter, the ticket counter or something, and he was just nasty and giving the lady behind the counter a hard time, and he was rude to everybody and loud and aggressive, and so as he leaves, the guy says, "Yeah, you know, I prayed." I said, "I pray that guy's plane just crashes," you know, and he said, "I know that wasn't the best prayer, but I was just so angry at him." So when I got to my gate, and I'm sitting in the gate, and we get up to go on the plane, lo and behold, the guy's in front of me, and he's getting on my plane. I'm thinking, I just prayed for my plane to crash. He said, "So I'll pray that he's the only one that doesn't survive." No, that's not the way I want to pray it either, you know? I mean, pure religion is an imitation of Jesus Christ. We should reflect Jesus. We should look in the mirror, and we should see Jesus in our actions. Western religion tends to be more separate from that idea of spirituality, and we're not going to get into it today, but it gets more into spiritism, right, which is not of God. And it also gets more into works-oriented stuff. So people will justify their spirituality by the kind acts that they bestow on other people. So secular humanists, for example, wonderful folks, and they're out there all the time helping. You'll see it. This hurricane will come, if it does, and you'll see people out there chipping in, doing all they can to help others, rescuing them from their homes, and, you know, cutting logs out of their driveway, and delivering aid where it needs to be, and opening their homes up to people and all that. But they're not doing it to glorify God. And I'm not going to get critical and say they shouldn't be doing it, because certainly in times of crisis, we don't want to discourage anyone from helping out. But there's a part to this where good religion is where we act out on this benevolence, and pure religion is where we do it as a reflection of Jesus Christ. I work with a little bit now with a group called Gideon Rescue Company. I may have mentioned it to them. And this is a group of young adults. I've never seen a group of young folks that are so hot for Jesus, that they are so on fire for Christ, you know. And I'm on a little chat thing with them, whatever, I don't know what you call it, but it's just a constant posting of encouraging words from God in times of crisis. And this is what they do. When the Kentucky floods happened, they had a big presence there. They have rescue dogs and people that do search and rescue. They do water rescue work. I recently, we gave them one of the thermal drones that they're going to be using in some of the search and rescue efforts. You know, and what do? Their main goal is to provide the physical relief that people need, but it's to carry the gospel message of Jesus Christ. Because in a crisis, it's sometimes the best time when people are most open for something for help. In the East, right, spirituality and religion are inseparable. That's how it basically goes. No matter how you define them, no matter what their definition of divinity is, they seem to be inseparable. So in the West, we have this sort of separation that we can identify between religion and spirituality, but that's not necessarily how it tends to go. Now, there's something called cultural Christianity as well. This is, I'm sorry I didn't put the attribution on here. This was from a pastor that I had read a couple of his articles. He said the most common mark of cultural Christianity is legalism. Would we agree with that? What is legalism? What is it? Legalism is having a set of rules and doctrines that you expect others to follow, but you can't really follow yourself. The Pharisees were legalists. They had all these rules that you were supposed to follow, but they didn't abide by those rules on their own. It says when Christianity becomes a habit rather than a spirit-filled life, when we emphasize taboos and rigid conformity to the letter of the law rather than the substance of it, we might as well be embracing cultural rather than real Christianity. When we were at a church, this other church that I would go to regularly when I was there out of town, and there was a young man there who who was just started coming to church, and he had, tattoos everywhere. He came from the world. He was led a bit of a rough lifestyle before he got there, but he found Jesus, and he came to the church and he was excited about it. And it was one afternoon after church was over, and we were having a fellowship luncheon, and he pulled this young man aside, and I was there and I heard it. And he just laid into him about the tattoos. Don't you know it's a sin to do that to your body and blah, blah. Here's this kid. What's he going to do? Like take him off right now? It's not like he can wash them off. And they happened when he was not a Christian in a different lifestyle. And now he's trying to find his way to Christ. And what are we going to do? Tell people they can't come to Christ if they got tattoos? Because we're in a lot of trouble if we're going to restrict people based on the way they look and talk and act and what they eat and what they say and what their habits are. If we're not willing to welcome them in right now, then we shouldn't even be here. And me and one of the elders took this man aside and talked to him and said, look, basically, you're not allowed to talk to newcomers anymore, because that's not what we do. We love people into Jesus. We don't beat people into Christ. Christ defines that cultural Christianity for us. 2 Timothy 3:1-5 says, you should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be very difficult times. I don't know. Feels to me like this must be the last days. If the last days are going to be very difficult times, and right now there's very difficult times, then it seems to me it's the last days. It's a bit of a circular logic, but if A equals B and B equals C, then A likely equals C. For people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unliving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. I'm very glad for me personally that I have never had a social media account. I've never been on Facebook or Twitter or clicked whatever they're called, all the different social media sites out there. I didn't do it at first because of my work in particular. I can't be on social media because of the work that I do. But I'm glad now because I don't know anybody in my life who isn't traumatized by the things that happen on social media. Anybody. That there's some trauma. Somebody says something, you certainly can't render your opinion on there anymore from what I hear without being like castigated and swatted and all the other things that they do to people, or canceled, or whatever they call it, right? It says they will be unloving and unforgiving, and they will slander others, and they have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure more than God. I'm not a great historian, but I've read that when all the great societies collapsed, that the last thing that happened was their love for pleasure. They got away from even the laws, and it was all about party, 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 and then everything came to a close. It says they will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. Stay away from people like that. Got a friend, he says, I go to the gym religiously, twice a year, just like Easter and Christmas, he said, And we see that. Maybe not so much here, I don't think. But I know that this is true for friends we have in other religions, that come Easter and Christmas, you can't barely get near the church. In synagogues, the high holidays are upon us. Monday starts Rosh Hashanah. We'll have Yom Kippur coming up after that. And you have to buy tickets to go to the synagogue for these high holidays. It costs a lot of money, a couple $100 to buy a ticket to be there because they're too crowded. They're not that crowded during the year, but boy, those holidays come, and all of a sudden everybody gets religion, They hear, he says, but they don't do. Ezekiel 33, 31-33 says, so they come as though they are sincere and sit before you listening, but they have no intention of doing what I tell them to. They talk very sweetly about loving the Lord, but in their hearts they are loving their money. They are very entertaining. You are very entertaining to them, like someone who sings lovely songs with a beautiful voice or plays well on an instrument. I found that in particular to be the saddest part of this. So when they watch a good sermon, they're like, oh, that was cool, and they go about their own business. Or they go to a great Bible study, and they're like, oh, yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, it's got historical merit. And then they go about their own secular way. It says they hear what you say, but they don't pay attention to it. Now it's starting to sound like my kids, I guess. But when all these terrible things happen to them, as they will, then they will know a prophet has been among them. Are you listening to what this is saying? We're out, it was like with Noah, right? He preached and he preached about it, and for 120 years he tried to build, he did build this ark, and nobody but his family paid any attention to him. But what happened when the rains came? What did the people do? They panicked. They're rushing the ark, beating on the doors. Now all of a sudden, Noah turned from being a lunatic to a prophet. And that's what they're saying. That's what Ezekiel tells us. We're out here preaching the gospel message of Jesus Christ. We're telling people what's about to befall them. We're trying to get them embedded with us. And they're thinking we're nuts. We're just some kind of radical lunatics. But, when it all comes crashing down, guess where they're going to be coming? To us. And we got to put our pride away. And there'll be no I told you so's. There'll just be open arms to bring people in lovingly. Amen. This is really weird. I found this, but, what we do is we tend to equate religion with churches, right? But some of the most vital and interesting parts of American religious life are outside those institutions. What we know is like popular religion. This is baby Skippy's 3 wise men money drawing incense. And you buy this and you burn it, and it brings money into your... I know. And when I came across this, I had to read it several different times, and it's like a mixture of the candle burning and incense with Catholicism and voodoo. And it says here, even capitalist acquisitiveness. This is from Timothy Phillip, Dean of the Faculty at King College. But it's just, I couldn't believe this when I saw it. You'd think that they call it something besides baby Skippies if they wanted it to be in sort of a religious connotation. But hey, that's just me. What defines spiritual Christianity? So remember, there's the Venn diagram. There's religion, and there's spirituality, and there's a place where those two come together. Miss White writes this. She says, before the final visitation of God's judgments upon the earth, there will be among the people of the Lord such a revival of primitive godliness as has not been witnessed since apostolic times. I haven't seen that yet. Have you? No. So we're not there yet. My dad used to always say, he said, it'll all be okay in the end. So if it's not okay, it's not the end yet. It says, the Spirit and power of God will be poured out upon his children. At that time, many will separate themselves from those churches in which the love of this world has supplanted love for God and his word. Are we hearing the 3 angels' message here? Come out of here, come out of her, my people, right? Babylon has fallen. Many, both of ministers and people, will gladly accept those great truths which God has caused to be proclaimed at this time to prepare a people for the Lord's second coming. Spirituality is internal. Let's look at Matthew 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when people insult you. It's internal spirituality. But it also has to be sincere. And let's look at Matthew 6 for that. Take care, Matthew 6:1 says, don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired, for then you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. Matthew 6:5 says, when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who pretend piety by praying publicly on street corners and in the synagogues where everyone can see them. Truly, that is all the reward that they will ever get. Matthew 6:16 says, when you fast, declining your food for a spiritual purpose, don't do it publicly as the hypocrites do. We don't go around going, oh, I haven't eaten since breakfast. And they try to look wan and disheveled so people will feel sorry for them. And we're around like, and if someone doesn't notice it, we make it worse. And if they still don't notice it, we start going, oh, and finally they go, what's wrong? Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because I really want to tell you about all the sacrifices that I'm making, I mean, have you seen this? I have. And I've seen people do it, and I ignore them, and then they get even worse, and they, whoa, and they start moaning and groaning more, and, oh, can you help me? All right, what's wrong? I haven't eaten since breakfast, and I'm hungry. I'm fasting today, and what are you fasting for? People can't even tell me sometimes. What are you praying for? Tell me, and I'll pray with you, So my counsel is, Matthew 6:25, don't worry about things, food, drink, and clothes, for you already have life and a body, and they are far more important than what you eat and what you wear. Amen. And Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given on to you as well. And let's go to the next verse in Matthew that says, so don't worry about what? God will take care of your tomorrow too. Live one day at a time. O-D-A-T, ODAT. But you know what? Here's the thing. This is a big thing that comes from some of the recovery fellowships. Narcotics Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, Sex Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and whatnot. Is living one day at a time. But I don't believe that we're supposed to live in pain and fear and struggling every single day, one at a time. Because if that's the case, if we're not progressing towards a place of peace and a place of getting better, we're not going to stay. I don't know about you, but if I had to live struggling every minute of every day, 24 hours a day, I don't think I'd survive it. This living one day at a time is, look at the predicate to this. It says, so don't worry about tomorrow. Living one day at a time is not living worry one day at a time. God will take care of your tomorrow too. It's not living one day at a time trying to figure out what's going to happen. I'm up here, the biggest hypocrite, talking about this, and I've been studying these spaghetti models on this hurricane nonstop. I'm like, oh, well, we just got an update. It's going north a little bit. Hurrah. There's a difference between being prepared and between worrying about it. Susan and I talk about this quite a bit, but what you can't do is you can't pre-fight the battle. Here's what happens. Let's say I take all this time and I stress over this hurricane. If it doesn't happen, I wasted all that time and all that energy. If it does, I have to live through it twice. Either way, it's a no-win for me in that situation. And so let's just trust that God will take care of us the way he does. My grandfather, when people would ask how you're doing, he would say, well, I've never missed a day above ground. That's a good start to life. That's a great answer. And spirituality is about action. Matthew 7. 7:1-2 says, judge not that you not be judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Never go to someone, I don't say, hey, you're ugly. I'm like, oh. Based on what? On what I look like, right? I don't compare myself to other people, and I don't judge other people compared to me, because that's a lose-lose situation. Matthew 7:12 says, therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for that is the law and the prophets. I have found that when I pray for other people, I pray for them what I want for me. And that way, I love them as I would love myself. Matthew 7:16 says, you will know them by their fruits. Matthew 7:21 says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven." In closing, let's take and put this together. Religion and spirituality combined. This is from a letter Ellen White wrote, letter 8, 1891. It's published in Mind, Character, and Personality, 802.1. It says, "Real religion has its seat in the heart, and as it is an abiding principle there, it works outwardly, molding the external conduct until the entire being is conformed to the image of Christ." Isn't that cool? You know, the big, it's not true, but people believe that microwaves cook from the inside out. So they think, oh, you know, when you put it in there, it'll start cooking in the middle, and then it works its way out, which actually isn't true. They cook from the outside in, but whatever. Anyway, but if you take that thought, that's what we're talking about here, is that true spiritual religion doesn't start on the outside with what we do and build its way in. It starts in our heart, and then we become a reflection of that character that we build as a result of who we are based on the reflection of Christ. If the abiding principle is not in the heart, the mind will not be molded after the deceiving similitude of Satan's mind, working his will to the ruin of the soul. The atmosphere which surrounds such souls is deleterious to all around them, whether believers or unbelievers. You know, it's this thing where it's not just about us, because when our character doesn't develop spiritually in accordance with the guidance in the Holy Spirit, it's not just us that suffer the consequences. It's everybody around us that suffers as well. You know, they say alcoholism is a family disease. Sin is a family disease also, because it affects everybody that it touches. And we can either be carriers or we can be immune from it by taking on the whole armor of God and abiding in the Holy Spirit. Amen? All right. I have this challenge for you, and it kind of comes in the way of the sermon, but I'm going to challenge you to this because I need to be challenged to this week as we are waiting with bated breath on this storm as to whether it's going to come or not. Because between the internet and 24-hour news, no one's going to get a break from it. Let's get prepared. I'm going to encourage you to get water and some food and batteries and gas in your cars before everybody starts panicking next week and there's nothing left. But if you're in those situations, here's my challenge. You be the one who's calm and collected, not pushing and shoving and grabbing and yelling and screaming and crying about it. Let us exhibit this self-control. Let us exhibit the confidence and faith that no matter what happens, God will always provide for us. You know, and let's try to take this one day at a time. That's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to stop looking at the spaghetti models for a couple days. Amen. Yeah, and just wait and see where we are in this. We've just come out of a 2-year situation where the predictions were pretty much all wrong anyway. So I am not going to get back into that mindset now. You know, the old saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, I'm going to let this one go to waste for sure. All right, let's close with a prayer in our usual way. Yirecha Adonai v'yishmerecha ya'ar Adonai panav alecha v'kunecha. Yisa Adonai panav alecha v'yeshemlecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and bring you peace. And everybody said? Amen. You are dismissed. If anybody wants to stay for a few minutes, we're just going to have a quick season of prayer about this whole storm thing, and let's ask for God's will and guidance. So if you want to stick around, it'll just be a couple minutes.